Seat 23. My name is Warner. I was 19 years old when I discovered that some places don't simply hold memories. Some places remember people. It happened in an old cinema called the Grand Regent, a beautiful but forgotten theater standing at the end of a narrow street. The theater had been closed for almost 10 years. Nobody knew exactly why. The official story was that the building had electrical problems. The unofficial story was much stranger. People said the theater had one seat that should never be occupied. Seat 23. I didn't believe any of it. Not until the night I sat in it. The Grand Regent. I loved old movies. One rainy Friday evening, I was walking home when I noticed something unusual. The doors of the Grand Regent were open. That was impossible. The theater had been locked for years. A faded sign above the entrance flickered weakly. One night only. I stepped closer. A man in an old-fashioned uniform stood inside the lobby. He looked at me. Movie? I nodded. How much? The man smiled. Free tonight. That should have been my first warning. He handed me a ticket. I looked down. The last show. Screen 3. Seat 23. I looked up. The man was gone. The lobby suddenly seemed much colder. Still, curiosity won. I walked toward screen 3. Seat 23. The theater was enormous. Rows of red seats stretched into darkness. There was nobody inside. Not one person. I checked my ticket. Row C. Seat 23. I found it near the middle. The seat looked older than the others. Its red fabric was torn. There were strange scratches on the wooden armrest. I sat down. Immediately. Click. The seat locked itself. I tried standing. It wouldn't move. I pulled harder. Nothing. Then the screen turned on. A black and white movie began playing. It showed the exact theater I was sitting inside. I leaned forward. The camera slowly moved through the empty room. Then it stopped. On seat 23. I stared at the screen. There was someone sitting there. A young man. He was facing away from the camera. I looked at my own seat. Then back at the screen. The person on the screen slowly turned his head. I couldn't see his face. The movie suddenly stopped. The screen became black. Then white letters appeared. You are early. I whispered. Early for what? A voice answered from behind me. The ending. I spun around. Nobody was there. The first warning. The seats suddenly unlocked. I jumped up. I was ready to leave. But the theater doors were gone. Where the exit had been was now a blank wall. I ran toward it. I searched for another door. Nothing. Then the projector started again. This time the movie showed the theater lobby. The same lobby I had entered. The camera followed the uniformed man. He walked toward a small room. He opened the door. Inside were dozens of old cinema tickets. Every ticket had the same number. 23. Then the camera moved closer. Some tickets had names written on them. I recognized several. People who had disappeared from the town years ago. My stomach tightened. Then I saw something that made my blood run cold. One ticket had my name. Warner. Age, 19. Seat 23. I stepped backward. No. The screen changed. A countdown appeared. 59:59. 59:58. 59:57. The whispering audience. The empty seats began making noises. First one. Creak. Then another. Creak. Then another. Soon the entire theater sounded as though hundreds of people were sitting down. But I could see no one. Then I heard whispering. Warner. I froze. Warner. The whispers came from every direction. I covered my ears. Stop. The theater became silent. For 3 seconds. Then someone laughed. A quiet, distant laugh. I looked toward the screen. The movie had changed. It showed a little boy sitting in seat 23. He was crying. A man in the old uniform stood beside him. The man leaned toward the boy and whispered something. The boy disappeared from the seat. The screen went black. Words appeared. Every show needs an audience. I suddenly understood. The theater wasn't showing movies. It was showing memories. And seat 23 wasn't a seat. It was a trap. The projection room. The exit suddenly appeared. I ran. I pushed through the door and found myself in a narrow hallway. At the end was a staircase. I climbed it. The stairs led to the projection room. Inside, an ancient projector was running. There was nobody operating it. But something was feeding film through the machine. I approached slowly. The film wasn't a movie. It was a recording of me. I watched myself entering the theater. Then sitting in seat 23. Then running through the hallway. Then entering the projection room. I stepped away from the projector. The film continued. It showed me standing exactly where I was standing now. Then something appeared behind me. I turned around. Nothing. I looked back at the film. The figure was closer. I turned again. Nothing. The figure moved closer on the film. Closer. Closer. Until its face filled the screen. It was the uniformed man. His eyes suddenly looked directly at me. He smiled. Then the projector stopped. A voice whispered, "You're watching the wrong part." I looked down. A second film reel was sitting beside the projector. Its label read, "The End, Warner. The Last Show." I grabbed the reel and threw it across the room. The theater shook. The lights flickered. The projector exploded into darkness. Then I heard footsteps. Step. 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 Something was coming up the stairs. I searched for somewhere to hide. There was nowhere. The door opened. The uniformed man entered. He looked exactly like the man from the ticket booth. But now I could see his face clearly. It was covered by an old theater mask. He pointed at me. "Your seat is waiting." I ran past him. The hallway had changed. Every door led back to screen 3. I opened one. Seat 23. Another. Seat 23. Another. Always the same. Then I noticed something. There was now someone sitting in the seat. Me. I was sitting there on the screen. But I wasn't alone. The uniformed man stood beside me. He placed his hand on my shoulder. I watched the screen in horror. Then the version of me on the screen slowly looked toward the camera. Toward me. He smiled. And whispered, "Don't sit down." I looked at the real seat 23. The seat was empty. Then I heard a voice behind me. "Warner." I didn't turn around. "Warner." The voice became louder. "Sit down." I ran. 23. I reached the theater doors. This time they opened. I rushed outside into the rain. The street was empty. I turned around. The Grand Regent looked abandoned again. The doors were locked. There was no sign. No lights. Nothing. I ran home. For several hours, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the ticket. Eventually, I checked my jacket. The ticket was still there. I turned it over. There was something written on the back. I hadn't noticed it before. Showtime, tomorrow. Seat 23. I threw it into the trash. The next morning, it was back on my desk. I burned it. The ashes disappeared. That evening, I received a message from an unknown number. There was only one photograph. It showed the inside of the Grand Regent. The theater was completely empty. Except for one person. Someone was sitting in seat 23. It was me. I immediately locked my phone. Then I heard something from my bedroom. Creak. I slowly looked toward the doorway. There was a red cinema seat standing in my room. Seat number 23 was attached to its side. I stepped backward. The television turned on by itself. The screen showed the Grand Regent. The uniformed man stood on the stage. He looked directly at me. Then he raised one finger. The screen displayed, "Final show, tonight." I couldn't move. Then another message appeared. "Bring an audience." Behind me. I heard the sound of hundreds of people sitting down. Creak. 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 I slowly turned around. My bedroom was empty. But every wall was covered with red cinema seats. And in the center of the room, seat 23 was waiting. Its backrest slowly moved forward, as if someone invisible had just sat down. Then the television whispered, "The movie is about to begin." The screen went black. And somewhere inside the darkness, I heard my own voice say, "Please don't let them see the ending. My name is Sandy. I am 14 years old, and I loved football more than anything. There was one place in our town where I spent almost every evening, the old Blackwood Football Club. The club had once been famous. Its stadium could hold thousands of people, but years ago, something happened during a night match. The game was suddenly stopped, the stadium was closed for months, and several players never returned to the club. Nobody liked talking about what happened. But I didn't believe in ghosts. At least, I didn't before that night. It was a cold Friday evening when our coach announced an important training session before the weekend tournament. "Everyone leaves by 9, Coach Martin said. The stadium gates will be locked after that." I nodded. Training went normally until the final practice match. Then, at exactly 9:17 p.m., the stadium lights went out. Complete darkness swallowed the field. Someone laughed nervously. "Power cut," one of the players said. A second later, the lights returned. But something had changed. A football was sitting in the middle of the field. Nobody had kicked it there. The ball slowly began rolling toward me. I stepped backward. Who kicked that? Nobody answered. The ball stopped directly at my feet. There was something written across it in black marker. Match at 12 o'clock. I looked toward Coach Martin. His face had gone pale. Everyone, he whispered, get inside. We rushed toward the changing rooms. Then we heard it. Thump. A football hitting the ground. Thump. Another. Thump. The sound was coming from the empty stadium stands. Coach Martin locked the changing room door. What is happening? I asked. He didn't answer. Then someone knocked. 3 slow knocks. Knock. 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 Everyone became silent. A voice came from the other side. Sandy. My heart froze. It was my voice. Exactly my voice. Sandy, open the door. I stared at everyone. Nobody moved. Then the voice whispered. You forgot the final player. Coach Martin suddenly grabbed my shoulder. Don't answer. What final player? I whispered. His eyes moved toward an old photograph hanging on the wall. It showed the Blackwood team from 20 years earlier. There were 11 players. But someone had scratched one player's face completely away. Under the photograph was a name. Elias Vale, number 12. Coach Martin finally told us the truth. 20 years earlier, Elias had been the club's youngest player. During a midnight practice match, he disappeared inside the stadium. They searched everywhere. They never found him. The club closed shortly afterward. And according to an old legend, every few years, the stadium demanded another player. I thought it was nonsense. Until the stadium clock suddenly started ticking. 11:58 p.m. Coach Martin looked at me. Sandy, stay here. But before he could finish, the lights went out again. When they came back on, everyone was gone. Everyone except me. I ran toward the exit. The doors wouldn't open. Then the scoreboard came alive. Blackwood FC 0. Visitors 0. Time 12 o'clock. A whistle sounded from somewhere behind me. I turned. 11 shadowy football players were standing across the field. Their faces were hidden in darkness. And behind them stood a 12th player. He wore an old Blackwood jersey. Number 12. He slowly raised his hand. The scoreboard changed. Sandy, player 12. The ball rolled toward me. A voice echoed through the stadium. Kick off. I wanted to scream. Instead, I heard myself whisper. No. The 12th player suddenly sprinted toward me. I ran. The stadium seemed endless. Every doorway led back onto the football field. Every corridor brought me closer to number 12. Then I noticed something. The old photograph. The scratched-out face of Elias. I remembered the words beneath it. Number 12. I grabbed the photograph from the wall. Behind it was a small metal key. I ran toward the stadium's old equipment room. Inside, I found a locked wooden box. The key opened it. Inside was an ancient football whistle and a newspaper clipping. The headline read, Young footballer disappears during midnight match. Underneath was a handwritten sentence. He wasn't taken. He was never allowed to leave. Suddenly, the door slammed shut. Number 12 was standing behind me. His face remained hidden. He pointed toward the whistle. I understood. The whistle was the only thing that could end the match. I grabbed it. The stadium shook. The shadows moved closer. I raised the whistle to my mouth. But before I could blow it, number 12 whispered, "If you end the match, someone must replace me." I stopped. Who? He pointed toward the field. There, standing beneath the scoreboard, was Coach Martin. But he wasn't alive. He was only a shadow. Then I understood. The club hadn't been searching for a new player. It had been searching for someone willing to finish the match. I blew the whistle. The sound was deafening. Every light in the stadium exploded into brightness. The 11 shadows disappeared. Number 12 looked at me for one final moment. Then he smiled. And vanished. The stadium doors unlocked. I ran outside. Police arrived later, but they found nothing unusual. The club was closed permanently after that night. At least, that's what everyone believed. 3 weeks later, our school football team had a tournament. We were warming up when I noticed something strange. A new player had joined the opposing team. He wore an old black jersey. Number 12. I stared at him. He slowly turned toward me. Then he whispered from across the field. "Kickoff, Sandy." The referee blew his whistle. And somewhere far away, inside the abandoned Blackwood Stadium, another football began bouncing. Thump. Thump. Thump.